Picture two people. Same year, same starting savings, same market. The first one, let's call him Jack, checks his portfolio every morning before coffee. When stocks rally, he feels like a genius and buys more, right at the top. When stocks drop, he feels sick and sells, right at the bottom. He reads headlines and reacts to them the same day. 10 years from now, Jack has worked hard, saved consistently, and still underperformed the market he was invested in the whole time. Not because he picked bad stocks, because he let his emotions trade for him. The second one, let's call her Emma, has the exact same portfolio, but she checks it once a quarter. When the market crashes, she doesn't panic. She sees it as stocks going on sale. When the market gets euphoric, she doesn't chase it. She gets a little more cautious, not less. She's not smarter than Jack. She's not luckier than Jack. She just has a framework. And 10 years later, that framework is the entire difference between the two of them. That framework has a name. It comes from a book written in 1949 by a man named Benjamin Graham called The Intelligent Investor. Warren Buffett, who was Graham's actual student at Columbia, has called it the best book on investing ever written. And what's strange is, a book written more than 70 years ago feels almost eerily relevant to the market we're looking at right now in the summer of 2026. So let's walk through the core ideas that separate a Jack from an Emma, and then look at how they apply to what's happening in markets today. The first idea is one Graham called Mr. Market. Picture a business partner who shows up at your door every single day. Some days he's euphoric, offering to buy your shares at a ridiculous price. Other days he's in despair, begging you to sell for pennies on the dollar. Here's the twist. You never have to trade with him. His mood is not the truth about what your investment is worth. It's just his mood. This is exactly where Jack and Emma split. Jack treats every visit from Mr. Market as news he has to act on. Emma treats it as noise she's free to ignore. The intelligent investor's job is to know the real value of what they own and only do business with Mr. Market when his offer is foolish, in your favor. The second idea is the one Buffett calls the single most important concept in the whole book: margin of safety. Never pay full price for an uncertain future. Buy at a real discount to what something is actually worth, so that if you're wrong or unlucky or the world just gets messy, you've got a cushion. Margin of safety isn't a nice to have. It's the whole foundation. Here's a simple way to picture it. Imagine you're crossing a bridge. The engineers know trucks will drive over it, but they don't build it to hold exactly the heaviest truck they expect. They build it to hold far more than that, just in case. That extra strength is the margin of safety. Graham wants you to build your investments the same way. If you calculate that a business is worth around $100 a share, you don't buy it at 95. You wait for 70 or 60, so that even if your calculation is a little off, you're still protected. It's not about being pessimistic. It's about respecting how often smart people turn out to be wrong. Third, Graham splits investors into two types. The defensive investor wants something simple: broad diversification, low effort, steady discipline. Today, that's basically an index fund investor. The enterprising investor is willing to roll up their sleeves, dig into individual businesses, and hunt for mispriced opportunities. Neither path is wrong, but Graham's warning is this: don't pretend to be enterprising if you're not actually going to put in the work. Half effort is the worst of both worlds. Fourth, price is not the same thing as value. In the short run, prices move on emotion, headlines, and crowd psychology. In the long run, prices tend to catch up with what a business actually earns. Graham's advice: study the business and let the noise be noise. And fifth, Graham was deeply skeptical of forecasting. Nobody reliably predicts where the market goes next. Not economists, not fund managers, not you or me. What actually works is discipline and process, not prediction. There's a sixth idea worth adding, one Graham hints at throughout the book. Diversification protects you from being wrong. No matter how carefully you analyze a business, you can still be wrong about it. The world changes, competitors show up, management makes mistakes nobody saw coming. Graham's answer isn't to try to be right every single time. It's to spread your bets across enough good decisions that no single mistake sinks you. Jack, in our story, tends to go all in on whatever's exciting that month. Emma spreads her money across many businesses and sectors precisely because she knows she can't predict which one will surprise her, for better or worse. And closely related to that is something Graham calls staying within your circle of competence, a phrase Buffett later made famous. If you don't understand how a business actually makes money, you have no way of judging whether its price makes sense. Graham's advice is blunt. If you can't explain the business in a sentence or two, you probably shouldn't own it. It's better to deeply understand a boring company than to vaguely understand an exciting one. Now here's where it gets interesting. Let's bring this into today. Right now, the stock market is historically expensive. One of the most respected valuation tools, the Shiller-Cape ratio, which smooths out 10 years of earnings to strip out short-term noise, is sitting around 41. That level has only been reached once before in market history, during the dot-com bubble of 1999 and 2000. In fact, going back to 1871, today's valuation is the second highest ever recorded. History's track record from this level is not encouraging. The S&P 500 has never posted a positive 3-year return after the Cape ratio crossed 40. And some research suggests that starting from a Cape around 40, markets have historically delivered slightly negative annualized returns over the following decade. But, and this is the twist Graham would want you to sit with, corporate earnings right now are genuinely strong. In the first quarter of 2026, S&P 500 companies posted their fastest revenue growth since 2022 and their fastest earnings growth since 2021. Wall Street expects that strength to continue through the year. So, which is it? Is this 1999 all over again? Or is this a market that's expensive because the businesses underneath it are actually firing on all cylinders? That's exactly the wrong question. The right question is, what is your margin of safety right now at these prices? Are you paying for a decade of already delivered good news? Or are you paying for real, unpriced future value? It's worth remembering how the last two big episodes like this actually played out. In 2000, the dot-com bubble burst, and it took the market roughly 7 years to fully recover its highs. And that's before accounting for how badly individual tech stocks got hit, many of which never recovered at all. In 2008, the financial crisis wiped out more than half the S&P 500's value in about a year and a half. Both times, the investors who did best weren't the ones who guessed the top and got out early. Almost nobody manages that. They were the ones who had already built in a margin of safety, stayed diversified, and didn't need to sell at the bottom because they weren't overextended in the first place. So what does this actually mean for you? If you're a defensive investor, stay the course. Keep your diversified portfolio, keep contributing on schedule, and resist the urge to either chase the rally or panic and sell. The discipline is the whole strategy. If you're an enterprising investor, this is a moment to be more selective, not less. A high valuation on the overall index doesn't mean every single stock is overpriced. It means your margin for error has shrunk, so the quality of your individual analysis matters more than ever. Don't try to call the top. Nobody rang a bell in 1999 either. The market kept climbing for months after it looked obviously overvalued. Focus on what you're paying relative to what you're actually getting. And if your portfolio has drifted, if stocks have quietly become a much bigger slice of your net worth because of the rally, consider rebalancing back to your target. It's mechanical, it's unemotional, and it doesn't require you to guess which direction the market goes next. Graham's most famous line is this: the market is a voting machine in the short run, but a weighing machine in the long run. Short-term, prices reflect popularity contests and mood swings. Long-term, they reflect what businesses are actually worth. Right now, in real time, that line is being tested all over again. The intelligent investor's job hasn't changed in 70+ years. Know what you own, know what it's worth, keep your margin of safety,
and let Mr. Market have his mood swings without you.